The hum of the airplane engines filled the cabin like a steady heartbeat. Amelia Ross rubbed her tired eyes and blinked at the seat in front of her. The red-eye flight from Chicago to New York was nearly full, and the air smelled faintly of coffee, recycled air, and expensive cologne. She had barely managed to afford the ticket, but this trip wasn't a luxury, it was survival. Tomorrow morning, she would walk into the headquarters of Whitestone Holdings, one of the biggest real estate firms in Manhattan, and interview for an administrative assistant position. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid twice as much as either of her current part-time jobs. If she got it, she could finally move her daughter, Lily, out of the cramped one-bedroom apartment above the laundromat. Her seatmate, a sharply dressed man with a calm presence, had said nothing since takeoff. He had dark hair that looked perfectly in place despite the long day, a gray suit that fit like it was made for him, and the kind of watch that could pay 3 months of her rent. The name on his boarding pass, she'd caught it when he'd set it down earlier, read Alexander Grant. He looked like the kind of man who never had to run for a bus or count the items in his grocery cart before paying. She tried to sit small beside him, hugging her purse close. The flight attendants dimmed the lights. The soft rumble of the engines became hypnotic. Amelia pulled her cardigan tighter, meaning only to rest her eyes for a moment. But exhaustion won. When she woke, the cabin was dark except for a few glowing screens. Something warm and firm supported her cheek. She blinked, and froze. Her head was resting on his shoulder. "Oh my God," she gasped, jerking upright so fast her earbuds fell out. "I'm so sorry, I didn't." The man turned his head slightly. His voice was calm, almost amused. "It's all right, I didn't mean to fall asleep on you." "You look tired," he said simply. "No harm done." His tone was gentle, unbothered, and that somehow made it worse. Amelia wanted to melt into her seat. She noticed his hands resting casually on his lap, strong, graceful hands that spoke of control. And then her eyes caught something she hadn't seen before, a wedding ring, silver and unmistakable. Her heart sank. Not that it mattered, of course. It wasn't like she was interested. But still, why did noticing the ring sting in a way she couldn't explain? He glanced sideways. "First time flying this route?" She swallowed. Yeah, I'm heading to New York for a job interview." His brows lifted. "Whitestone Holdings." Her head snapped up. "How did you?" He smiled faintly. "You mentioned it in your sleep. Something about, don't mess this up." Her face burned. "Oh no, don't worry," he said. "You sounded determined, not desperate." "That's generous," she muttered. "I'm both." That earned a soft chuckle from him. "Determination looks good on you." She wasn't sure how to respond, so she sipped her water and turned to the window. Outside, clouds floated like islands in a black ocean. After a few minutes, he spoke again. "What position?" "Administrative assistant," she said. "I'm good at organizing chaos. Which, with a 5-year-old, is pretty much my daily life." He looked at her more closely now. "You're a mother." She nodded. "Single mom. My daughter's name is Lily. She's 5 going on 15. Sounds like she keeps you busy." "Constantly," she said, smiling softly. "But she's the reason I'm doing this. I just want her to have more than I did." Something flickered in his expression, interest, maybe admiration, maybe memory. "That's a good reason. What about you?" she asked. "Work trip." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Something like that." There was something in his voice, distance, maybe pain. Before she could ask, turbulence shook the plane. Amelia clutched the armrest. "It's all right," he said calmly, his hand brushing hers just briefly, a small, steadying gesture. "Just rough air." Her pulse steadied, though not entirely because of the turbulence. When the flight began its descent, the captain's voice echoed over the intercom. Amelia gathered her things, trying not to overthink the past few hours. She'd slept on a stranger's shoulder. A married stranger's shoulder. "Good luck tomorrow," Alexander said as he stood, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Thanks. And, sorry again for," she gestured vaguely toward his shoulder. He gave a small smile. "Don't mention it." As he turned toward the aisle, she caught a snippet of his phone conversation, his voice low and firm. "Yes, I'll address the divorce publicly next week. No statements until then." Divorce. The word caught her off guard. She looked down at the ring on his hand again. It gleamed under the cabin lights, suddenly less like a symbol of love and more like a chain he hadn't yet removed. Before she could process it, he was gone, swept up in the crowd of first-class passengers. The next morning, Amelia stood in the marble lobby of Whitestone Holdings, clutching her resume so tightly her fingers hurt. She wore her best navy blazer, the one she'd bought secondhand and pressed 3 times that morning. "Ms. Ross," the receptionist called, "you're up next. The hiring manager will see you now." Her heart raced as she followed the woman down the corridor. The office was vast, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Behind a sleek desk sat a man in a gray suit, flipping through papers. When he looked up, her stomach dropped. Alexander Grant. For a second, she thought she was hallucinating. He blinked, then smiled slowly, the same quiet, knowing smile from the plane. "Well," he said, setting his pen down. "Small world. You work here?" She stammered. "I do," he said. "I'm the CEO." Her mouth went dry. "The CEO?" "Yes, Alexander Grant, Whitestone Holdings." He extended a hand across the desk, amused. "Though I suppose we've already met." She was too stunned to move. You didn't say anything on the flight." "I wasn't exactly on the clock," he said lightly. "And I wanted to see if you'd mention why you were coming to New York." Her mind spun. "So you knew I was interviewing for your company?" "I guessed," he said. "I wasn't certain until now." Amelia's pulse hammered in her ears. If I'd known who you were, I never would've fallen asleep on my shoulder," he said, lips twitching. "That's a first for me, I assure you." She wanted the floor to swallow her. "This is so unprofessional. I'm sorry." "Relax, Ms. Ross," he said gently. "You didn't do anything wrong." Still, she felt out of place, sitting across from a man whose world was so far removed from hers. He flipped through her resume. Single mother, 2 part-time jobs, community college degree, volunteered with Habitat for Humanity. He looked up. "You've worked hard." "I've had to," she said quietly. He nodded, studying her. "You said on the plane you were good at organizing chaos." "I am. Good. My schedule is chaos," he said dryly. "My previous assistant left last month. We need someone grounded, someone who doesn't scare easily." Amelia blinked. "Wait. Are you saying?" "I'm saying," he said, "if you're willing to start Monday, the job is yours." Her mouth fell open. What?" Just like that, he leaned back. "You impressed me, Ms. Ross. Not with your resume, though it's solid, but with your attitude. You didn't complain once on that flight, even when life clearly hasn't been easy for you." She stared at him, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes." Her heart swelled. "Yes, absolutely, yes." He smiled. "Welcome to Whitestone." Over the next weeks, Amelia settled into her new job. She proved herself quickly, organized, efficient, discreet. Alexander was demanding but fair, and beneath his composed exterior she sometimes caught glimpses of something more human: fatigue, loneliness, maybe even warmth. Rumors swirled through the office about his pending divorce. No one dared ask him directly, but Amelia noticed he no longer wore his ring. One evening, long after most employees had gone home, she found him standing by the window, city lights reflecting off the glass. "You should go home," he said without turning. "So should you," she replied. "Even CEOs need sleep." He glanced over, a faint smile on his lips. "That advice sounds familiar." She laughed softly. "Yeah, well, you looked like you needed the rest." For a long moment, they just stood there, silence stretching between them. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Why did you give me the job so quickly?" "Really?" He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Because I saw someone who reminded me what it means to start over." Her throat tightened. "You're talking about your divorce?" He nodded. "When you've spent years building something that falls apart, you learn to appreciate people who still believe they can build again." She didn't know what to say to that. He turned then, his expression soft. "You said you wanted your daughter to have more. I think you're already giving her that." Amelia blinked back sudden emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "You know, I never thanked you either." "For what?" "For letting me be human on that flight," he said. "It's been a long time since someone treated me like just a person." Outside, the city glowed. Inside, something unspoken passed between them, understanding, maybe hope. She didn't know what their story would become. But she knew this: sometimes, life rearranges itself in midair. And sometimes, waking up on the wrong shoulder can lead you exactly where you're meant to be. The airplane cabin buzzed softly with the hum of engines and the quiet murmur of midnight travelers. Amelia Ross pressed her head against the window, eyes heavy, heart heavier. She hadn't meant to fall asleep, she never did on flights, but between her two jobs, a restless 5-year-old, and the stress of an upcoming interview, exhaustion had won. This flight from Chicago to New York wasn't for leisure. It was her chance at stability. Whitestone Holdings, a company she'd only dreamed of working for, had invited her for an interview as an administrative assistant. The position promised benefits, a livable wage, and maybe even enough for her daughter, Lily, to have her own room someday. Next to her sat a man who radiated quiet control. His charcoal gray suit looked custom-made, his watch gleamed with quiet authority, and his dark hair stayed perfectly in place even at midnight. His name, she'd caught it when he'd handed over his boarding pass earlier, was Alexander Grant. He hadn't said a word since takeoff, but there was something about him, composed, assured, the kind of presence that filled a room even in silence. Amelia hugged her cardigan tighter. People like him lived in another universe. She wondered what it might be like to have that kind of ease, to not worry about daycare bills or broken car engines. Her head grew heavier, her vision blurred. Just a few minutes of rest, she told herself. Just until the next drink service. When she woke up, the world was still, soft, dimly lit. She blinked and froze. Her head rested on his shoulder. Panic surged through her. Oh my God. She sat bolt upright, nearly knocking over her water. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. He turned his head, eyes calm and faintly amused. It's all right. His voice was deep and unhurried. You look tired. Her face burned. Still, I shouldn't have. Trust me, he said lightly, I've had worse seatmates. That small smile on his lips didn't help her heartbeat. Trying to regain composure, she noticed his hand resting near his armrest, strong, elegant, and wearing a silver wedding ring. Of course, he was married. She straightened in her seat, forcing distance. Married or not, she had no business being flustered by a stranger. Headed to New York for business? He asked, as if to put her at ease. Actually, an interview, she said, gripping her cup. Administrative position at Whitestone Holdings. He paused, a subtle glint of surprise, or was it interest, in his eyes. Good company, he said slowly. Tough to get into. I know, she said softly. But I need this. I've got a daughter. I can't keep juggling shifts forever. For a moment, something softened in his expression. You're a single mom, she nodded, embarrassed at how quickly the words had slipped out. 5 years old, smartest kid I know, and I'm doing my best. That's more than most, he said quietly. The sincerity in his tone startled her. He wasn't just being polite, he meant it. She glanced sideways. What about you? Work trip? He hesitated, gaze flicking toward the window. You could say that. Before she could ask more, the plane jolted through turbulence. She gasped and gripped the armrest. It's fine, he murmured, steadying her with a light touch to her hand. Just rough air. She let out a shaky laugh. I hate flying. Then it's good you're sitting next to me, he said with a small smirk. I don't let planes fall. The joke eased her tension more than she expected. They spoke for the rest of the flight in fits and starts, small talk about cities, work, and the strange way life reroutes people. He was guarded but kind, and when he smiled, it was genuine but tinged with weariness, like a man carrying more than he let on. As the plane began its descent, she turned to him. Thanks for not complaining about, she gestured awkwardly, the whole sleeping on your shoulder thing. He chuckled. It was the best flight I've had in months. Something about the way he said it made her blush again. When they landed, he stood to grab his briefcase. As he spoke quietly into his phone, his tone shifted, firm, commanding. A man used to being obeyed. Then, as Amelia stepped into the aisle, she heard him say something that made her freeze mid-step. Greater than, tell the board I'll release a statement about the divorce next week. No media leaks until then. Her eyes flicked instinctively to the ring on his hand. Divorce. The word changed everything, and nothing, all at once. He turned, caught her looking, and for a brief second, their eyes met. His expression was unreadable, part apology, part something else. Then he was gone, swallowed by the stream of first-class passengers. Amelia stood frozen in the aisle long after he disappeared. She told herself it didn't matter, he was just a stranger she'd never see again. But as she stepped off the plane, her heart whispered otherwise.